Welcome to Two Guys on a Porch today. One of us is witty and incredibly charming. The other has something in common with a KFC Colonel. Stick around to the end to find out how well we're doing with our four bonded selections today.
Hey there, welcome to Two Guys on the Porch. I'm Jason, this is Bradford. Welcome to the first episode of Season 2. And here again, we are on another field trip because it's cold outside. And the porch, while it's very welcoming, it's cold right now. So here we are at the Standard Club at our next field trip.
Yeah, warm and inviting at the Standard Club. And so if you're going to be watching for the next few weeks, we're going to be coming to you from the Standard Club in Nashville. Very historic location. Was built in the 1840s. It's an Italianate structure. That's an architectural term. If it were built today, they would have used Italian-ish as the phrase to describe it. And it's the only structure of its kind remaining in Nashville.
Yeah, I mean, downtown is, even from 20 years ago is totally different now. This is the only really residential for lack of a better word, condo townhouse left. Everything else has been demolished. It's been originally the land before the house was built. It was owned by McGavick, Dedrick, very famous historic Nashville people. Then a lady built a house here. It was a boarding house. Was a doctor's office, ophthalmologist's house for a home and office for a while. So it's a very historic property. In later iterations, it was bought by the Smith family, and Josh Smith, their son, converted it into a restaurant and club. And it's, if you're in Nashville, and invite you to come out here. It's open to public. You can have dinner here, but it's also a club. It's you can join the club here. And I would say, from personal testament, this is where Emily and I come for date night. So it's a great place to come have dinner. Nice, quiet dinner to spend time with each other. It's a home away from home, if you will. And you can smoke cigars, have great bourbons, and a lot of friendly people here.
You have to be sponsored by a member to join the club. So you might get a lot of people hitting you up.
I'll sponsor you. Here's the deal. You like and subscribe. And, so remember, it's twoguysonaporch.com.
The membership doesn't come with.
No, it doesn't come with it. You've got to pay your own membership fee. But twoguysonaporch.com. Email us. I'll be your sponsor. Join in here. It's a great club. We'll have you join the club. I will do this. If you join the club, I'll meet you up here and we'll drink some of these bourbons together. So Josh Smith is a great host. Thank you again to Josh allowing us to film here. It's a great place.
Yeah, and so we're going to talk a little bit about what we're smoking first. And this is Diamond Crown Maximus. This was generously provided by Hedge Burt.
Yeah, one of our good friends, but also one of our original guys that was forced conned or whatever to watch our podcast and to like and subscribe. So thank you, Hedge. He went by his stage name for a while, Bert, but that's an inside joke there. But Hedge, the guys, these cigars, and they smoke very well.
The reason he got us these cigars is because you don't really find these in stores very often. They're difficult to find, and the reason is it's primarily through mail order. J.C. Newman, online cigar store, if you will. And they partnered with Fuente to create this as a specific mail order cigar. This is a 5x50 ring gauge. So not quite a Robusto. It's a little longer than that. If you remember my mistake in describing ring gauge before, which is how big around it is. But this 50/64 of an inch would be the description of this. What is distinctive about this cigar, it's different than Fuente, which is typically medium to full-bodied. This is full-bodied. And I think we're a few puffs into this. I concur.
Yeah, well, but I would tell you this is I'm more of the medium mild guy, and for a full-body cigar, this is great. Doesn't have, when it comes to cigars, it's the 2-point scale of, cat shit in your mouth taste later on versus not. And This one is great. It's really smooth. It doesn't have a bite to it. It's I'm a fan.
Now, I wouldn't be able to smoke this all day. It's strong, it's oily, it's
Yeah.
got a lot to it. So over time, it would wear me out. I would
can see
probably
that.
catch a buzz from this and have to take a nap later on. But for what it is, which is a smaller cigar, this would be perfect.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's an appropriate cigar to smoke here in the library room here at the Standard Club.
So now that you've brought up where we are,
Yeah.
we're in the library. And as I mentioned, the house was built in the 1840s. And so, quick history lesson, the American Civil War took place from 1861 to 1865. Tennessee was the first Confederate capital to fall to the Union in 1862. Later President, then General Ulysses Grant, came down, took over Fort Donelson, one of the other forts, made the capture of Nashville possible, and the Union occupied effectively then the state of Tennessee for the remainder of the war, including the fact that the governor, Andrew Johnson, was Lincoln's running mate. He did that for sectional reasons to make sure he had a Southern person on the ticket. So one of the three Tennessee presidents, and we'll talk about another one later. So this is the room where General George Thomas, a forgotten Union general, planned the Battle of Nashville, which effectively ended the Western campaign of the Civil War. So, real quick lesson. General John B. Hood came up from Alabama, through Spring Hill, routed the Union there.
And for clarification's Hood, it's Confederate general. He's
Confederate general, right. And a former student of General Thomas. And so they routed the Union there, missed an opportunity to commit further damage to them, then came up to the Battle of Franklin. The Union by then had had a chance to regroup. That was a devastating loss for the Confederacy. They had more Confederate generals killed there than any battle of the war. I had my great-great-grandfather was captured at that battle. Fortunately, wasn't killed because I wouldn't be here. I had another relative who was killed and buried at McGavock, which is the house, one of the battle sites. And then the Union retreated and gathered here with 70,000 troops for what remained about 20,000 Confederate troops. And what is significant about General Thomas is he planned what is generally described as the most perfectly executed battle, some regard in military history, certainly the Civil War. One of the reasons he's forgotten is because he burned all of his papers before he died, and he died only about 5 years after the war. And so not a lot is remembered about him unless you're somewhat of a military historian. And he was not completely trusted by his superiors because he was from Virginia. His family never spoke to him again when he stayed in the Union Army at the outbreak of the Civil War.
Oh, wow.
When he died, there were, Sherman was there, Grant was there, not one family member. They never spoke to him again. They turned his picture around on the wall, never to look at him again. And so he carried that with him, but was obviously on the right side of history in doing that. So, yeah, perfectly executed battle planned in this room.
Well, that helps explain, too, why this house still exists. Nashville, for the most part, was left intact because Nashville fell so quickly. There wasn't a expanded battle here. It didn't carry on, as opposed to like Sherman through Georgia, right? There was nothing left in Atlanta. Atlanta was pretty much destroyed by that. And for the most part, Tennessee was left alone because Tennessee fell so quickly. And the reason, with its strategic position on the Cumberland, Cumberland dumping into the Mississippi and Tennessee River, this whole state went down pretty quickly. And so this is probably one of the reasons why the house was preserved.
Right, that's a great point. And the battle took place in December of 1864. The war was over less than 6 months later. Sherman, in September, had invaded Georgia. Hood's goal was to turn Sherman's attention away, bring him into Tennessee, and, Hood wanted to defeat the Union here and then go link up with Lee and, have kind of another affront. But Gettysburg had decimated Lee in July of 1863. So this was a last-ditch effort. And Hood was really foolhardy in just committing terrible loss of life in a known losing effort, or should have known it was a losing effort.
Yeah. So even more reason it's fun to kind of be here on our field trip, kind of a historic site and everything. They even let Kimber in today. So, we always travel with Kimber, and she's with us today. I suspect, I don't know, this may be the first time a dog's been in the club. Josh usually doesn't let me bring my dog, and I don't. Maybe I should better say Emily usually doesn't let me bring Kimber along with our date night. So,
and our topic for today has to do with, let's go back to Thomas, not trusted by his superiors, and it's the idea. Our topic is that we don't really trust the government.
No, we don't.
And what's up with that? And it ties in nicely, that topic does, with what we're drinking today. And so today we're featuring 4 bottled in bond whiskeys. And I almost said bourbon, but because we have a Jack Daniel's product, we have bottled in bond whiskeys. And so that represents the 1897 first U.S. food safety law passed. And it was to put the government stamp of approval because they were trusted to provide a safe consumption of alcohol to the American public.
Right, because anybody could, put up their still in their backyard, make some stuff. It might not be safe. It might have methanol as a contaminant.
And tobacco juice.
To color it. And
horse urine.
Just whatever. Right. Yeah, stuff you don't want to in your... But methanol will blind you pretty quick. Like, one glass, you're blind. So it was a quality thing and a safety issue. Bottled in bond, some people would say the government did that for safety. Others would be that the government just wanted their tax, right? They part of it was just to put their tax stamp on there.
Yeah, and it was a bit of a compromise with regard to the taxes because they had to pay the tax at the end of that aging period. So a couple of distinctives about bottled in bond. Has to be in a government-approved warehouse. And at the time, and I think still, there are 2 keys to the lock. One on site at the distillery and the other in the hands of the revenuer, the government official. So the distillery couldn't get into that warehouse.
Couldn't sneak it out.
That's right, without government present. It has to be aged for 4 years at a minimum.
And remind me again, bourbon is 2 years, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
So it has to be aged for 4, and it has to be bottled at 100 proof.
Yeah, exactly 100 proof.
That's right. No more, not 101, not 99. Yeah. And so it can have water added to bring down the proof.
Yeah.
The season, this is an interesting distinctive, is that it has to be from a single distilling season. So
it's like a 6-month period?
Yeah, it's referred to as spring or fall, spring being January through June, fall July through December. And so you can't bring last year's and mix it up. It has to be from that season. So we've got 4 with 3 distilleries represented. We've got McKenna 10-year and Old Fitzgerald, which are both Heaven Hill products. So Old Fitzgerald would be considered high premium, particularly with what we have. That's a 10-year-old, as is the McKenna. And then we've got the Jack Daniel's Bonded, which we've tried before. And then we've got bottom shelf Benchmark. And I say bottom shelf because that's literally where you find it in the liquor store.
Yeah.
It's $18 a bottle. It's considered, but people that know will tell you it's pretty good, and that's a Buffalo Trace product. So we kind of know what Buffalo Trace turns into over time.
Exactly. And that's what I like about doing this podcast is that we mix these things together. So compared that Benchmark to the Old Fitzgerald. Old Fitzgerald, that's, it's originally a Cecil Weller product. Pappy Van Winkle had his fingerprints on it in the beginning. That was his thing back in the beginning. It's since been sold. But Old Fitzgerald is hard to find. You not to say you can't find it on a shelf, but it's very allocated.
Yeah.
So the contrast between Benchmark and Old Fitzgerald, I don't know if anybody would put those two in the same spot, same tasting.
Yeah, and I am curious to taste this McKenna with the Old Fitzgerald because you have the same distillery. So you do have different mash bills between the McKenna and the Old Fitzgerald. Don't ask me what it is. I couldn't tell you off the top of my head. But what's interesting to me, we've tasted the bonded. I've had a few bonded in the past. I really enjoy them. To me, they come out a little more complex than your typical whiskey. And I think that 100 proof, to me, it hits that perfect spot of it's not so weak and watered down like an 80 proof or a 90. You actually get some character to it. You get some flavor notes that aren't lost in just how mild it is. Yeah. But it's not so hot that it kind of loses everything.
So back before they did the bonded, the little tricks of the trade to see how much alcohol was in there was to swirl it around your glass and see if you have legs in there. Legs would be just the drippings coming down the side. The idea being that if it's a higher proof whiskey, 50 or above, you're going to see, as you swash it around, the alcohol evaporates, water's left, and water's more viscous, and there's something called the Margoni effect, but whatever. It basically sticks to the side of your glass, and you see the legs come down.
Now, what do you tell the backyard styrofoam cup sipper about legs?
You're out of luck. The other way to do it is I guess if you had the styrofoam cup, you can just take the bottle, shake it up. If it's greater than 50%, it's going to have bubbles. It's going beading, as they call it in the jargon, but it's bubbles. You shake it up. Oh, so this has got alcohol in it. So if you're buying a bourbon from your backyard neighbor who just cooked it up, shake the bottle and see if it beads up, and kind of gives you an idea how much alcohol's in there.
You almost sound like you know what you're talking about.
No, I'm just enough to be dangerous. Just enough to be dangerous. We are, again, I say this because we know so little. We're not experts. We enjoy drinking bourbon. So we'll ask for grace if we say something stupid, but we enjoy it.
So I've tasted this McKenna, and I'll be curious as to your feedback, but I'm going to be surprised if all of the others we taste aren't better. And the reason I say that is the finish was more alcohol forward than anything else. It ran down a little hot to me. And the finish, by the way, is what do you get when you swallow it? That's kind of what that means.
Yeah, exactly.
And so the flavor, it's got a pleasant nose. It's got, a fine mouthfeel, decent enough flavor, like a bonded you would expect with some, complexities. But, yeah.
I was struck by its color. If it's been aged 4 years, it's relatively light looking. It doesn't have the darkness that you see with an older age bourbon. The nose, not much to it. It's kind of a flat nose. It starts off good, but I agree with you. It's a little watery in the mouth, and it's okay. It's okay finish, but not great. It's not a whole lot to it.
Yeah, and, since we are in season 2, this is our attempt to be a little more descriptive of what we're tasting, drinking, and because you guys told me, and I say you guys meaning Huff Daddy too, how bad I suck at describing whatever it is we're drinking.
Well, part of this is just learning to use your palate, right?
Well, right. I go with kind of the good-bad scale, and so I've decided to use much more descriptive words like exemplary, wonderful, pleasant, as opposed to just good.
Yeah.
At some point, maybe I'll be able to say things like vanilla, caramel, oak.
Yeah. Well, you're educated, man. You can use those words. And for clarification, Huff Daddy is our illustrious producer who does a wonderful job. Thank you guys. All right, so what's our next?
So my description of this would be,
Yeah, it's not bad. It's it's good. It's good drinking.
I'm not turning it down.
No, definitely not going.
But I'm probably not going to go buy this. And by the way, if you do, and I haven't bought this in a while, and by the way, all McKenna bottled and bond that I've ever seen is 10-year. So you would expect it to be really smooth, really good. It's fine, but it's, $40, $45. So it's not bad from a price point. From a value standpoint, it's good. However, we're about to move to one of my favorite whiskeys, period, and that being the Jack Daniel's bottled and bond.
Yeah, we've tasted this before in a prior episode. Be sure to go back and check out that episode. we won't be so loquacious in that episode because we've learned our big vocabulary words.
Like loquacious.
Yes, well, I learned that one before. But anyway, Bonded, this Jack Daniel's Bonded, as I recall, it was a favorite of ours.
Absolutely.
We really enjoyed this last time.
Yeah, this is, one of my favorite things to drink. And by the way, a bottle of this is $40. I mean, it's very reasonably priced, and I think tremendous value for that. You have, it's very pleasant on the nose. You pick out like that sweet caramel, perfect notes, as I would describe it. And it's different than standard Jack. It's got a whole lot more complexity and character to it.
You're going to finish that glass. That's
almost in one swallow. And when you do swallow it, the finish is perfect. It's got a full mouthfeel. It's not thin, and you're going to get that thinner mouthfeel on the 80 or 90 proof. So it's got more fullness to it. And you do detect that caramel and the char from when they charcoal filter it. So yeah, to me, it's just kind of hits the perfect notes of flavor and character.
I agree. The only thing I would add to it, it's not much of a nose to it.
That's true.
Not much of a nose to it, but the tasting on it, I think you're spot on there. So you're getting better. I think. I
had nowhere to go but up.
Well,
Jason.
you just,
from hey, you really suck to.
How do you get to Carnegie Hall? Practice, practice, practice. Just keep drinking and talking about it.
Keep drinking. Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, I think this is a race. Jack Daniel's Bonded is definitely in the lead over McKenna,
which I think to some degree we expected. I've had two of these. I'd had McKenna before, and I'd had the Bonded. I've not had the latter two, but I think we guessed because we'd had that Bonded before that it was going to be better.
Yeah.
So now we're going to move to the benchmark, and I'm really excited about this because it's so cheap. We love Buffalo Trace products, so I'm really curious as to what it's going to turn out to be in the midst of this.
So talking about bonded stuff, what I found curious is that, and with the government, so this was the government's move to make things better, but it was really a private sector, I guess I should say, guy who started all this. It was E.H. Taylor, the E.H. Taylor, the same
which
name
we've
as
not had on the.
But we will.
Not him, but his bourbon.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
He's long dead.
Eddie or Edmund. Eddie's been dead for a long time. But it was his instigating that started the whole bonded process. So hats off to the old colonel for doing this.
Yeah, and I wonder, because you had the temperance movement that had begun in earnest by this point. There was so much alcohol consumed in the latter part of the 19th century because water was so unsafe. So a lot of beer drinking. Anheuser-Busch made a killing off of figuring out how to make beer popular. A lot of people drinking whiskey, probably more per capita at that time than any time in history.
It just occurred to me, is it ironic that E.H. Taylor's great uncle died, Zachary Taylor, President Zachary Taylor,
yeah.
He died of cholera.
Well, did he?
Well, it's gastroenteritis. I think it was cholera.
Do you know that there was so much controversy around President Taylor's death? He died in 1849 that, 10, 20 years ago, they exhumed his body to test it to see if he had been assassinated.
Yeah, they were been poisoned, yeah.
And determined somewhat undefinitively that not likely, they couldn't say for sure, and that he most likely died from gastroenteritis.
Yeah, but they didn't really know cholera back then. The whole germ theory, that was just relatively new.
I did not realize that was an ancestor.
Yeah, it was.
Taylor.
Yeah, E.H. Taylor. He colonel. He wasn't really a colonel, but was
he a Kentucky colonel?
He was,
which is an honorific title.
It is. Did I tell you I'm a colonel?
I was about to ask. Are you a colonel?
Yeah, so Kentucky colonels.
We're Colonel Hubbard.
It's an honorific title. It's a charitable organization. one of my patients saved his life, and so he nominated me to be a colonel. And so, yeah, you get to donate money every year and to good causes. So, yes, yeah. So,
Wait a minute. You just flippantly said, yeah, I saved his life and blah, blah, blah.
well, okay. Well, I didn't mean to be
All
dramatic.
right, that has happened in my life. Wait, let me count. None.
Well, I mean, how many house fires have you put out, right? It's just,
None.
none, but neither have I. But, I'm a doctor, and that's my gig, right? So that's what I do. And by God's grace, that's been my call in my life, and I really enjoy it. So,
I mean, that's really incredible. That is a remarkable call.
Yeah,
And a remarkable amount of pressure that you're under every time you walk into a surgery room.
it is, but that's the neat thing when you're doing God's call in your life. And I honestly don't think of what I do having more value than somebody else's job. I mean, really, it's just what I've been called. It's my role. I mean, what's more important, the hand or the foot? I mean, it's we each have our own roles, and so I think the key thing is, unfortunately, me and my colleagues, they get a big ego from it. I think the big thing is to realize this is just your calling, and God's given me my gifts. The banker doesn't talk about how much money he has because he knows the money in his bank is somebody else's money. The same thing, what I've been gifted with are not my gifts, it's the gifts that God has given me.
Well, you bring that up, and this is completely off topic, unplanned, but when you moved here right out of residency, you correct me if I'm wrong, but I recall you getting together on a weekly basis for a number of years with Robbie Hendrick,
Yep.
a friend and pastor. And part of that was to combat the God complex that would be so common to your profession in particular as a
Yeah.
neurosurgeon, to keep you grounded, to remind you that, man, it's not all about you.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, so you look at other neurosurgeons and they're pretty egotistical. Let's call the kettle black here, right? I mean, that's for whether they went, what came first, the chicken or egg? Were they that way before they got there, or did the occupation make them into that?
And you've got to have a healthy enough ego to pursue that.
Yeah, I guess so. But regardless of how it happens, I was aware that is a danger in the occupation. And so I intentionally went out to kind of safeguard against that.
So we've got kids in medical school.
Yep.
What advice would you give them or any young doctor today to ensure their life success, not professional success necessarily, but to maintain the balance of the work they do relative to the life they live?
I think first and foremost, you just love your patients. You think of your mother, you think of your kids, and you treat that patient like their family. They essentially are your family. Or you think of them like a spouse. I often say once you operate on somebody, it's like marrying them. That is your patient. You're married to that patient now because they're yours. And so first and foremost, you treat them like that, and it kind of works out all in the end. You realize the source of your skills and your talent. I mean, God has blessed my work. Yeah, you put in the work, but lots of people work hard, right? You work hard. Everybody works hard. Well, not everybody, but many people work hard, and it's God blessing that work. And so I think that's the key to it.
Yeah, that's good advice. So back to the original topic.
Yes.
Although I'm finding this very interesting.
That's the interesting about our podcast is we just sit here and talk. I mean,
Yeah, that's
people
a
have asked
rabbit
us
trail.
before, like, oh, you do research and well, not really. We don't prep for this because the whole thing with two guys on a porch, it was born out of us buddies hanging out on a porch and just talking, drinking bourbon and smoking cigars, occasionally playing some poker. And so this is the, just spontaneous conversation of where it goes.
Yeah, and it's a little difficult for me because I really enjoy the homework that I get to do relative to whiskeys and topics and all that. And then I'm like, oh, I'm going to try too hard. I'm going to blow it. I'm going to screw it up because I've tried too hard.
It's falling off a log. It's just, hang out, drink bourbons. But,
so the distrust of the government,
Yeah.
the Pew Research company, which has been around for a long time, in 1958 started a poll, the trust in the U.S. government. And the basis of their poll depends on one question, which is, do you trust the government to do the right thing always or most of the time? And those are two components. So adding those together, back when they started, Dwight Eisenhower was president. I would have trusted him too. He was 5-star general, commander of the Allied forces in World War II. He didn't have a party. He could have been a Democrat or Republican. It didn't matter. He was going to win.
Yeah.
And he soundly defeated the same Democratic candidate. He decided to go Republican. Defeated him in the 52 and 56 elections, Adlai Stevenson. And so in 1958, he's still president, rounding out the end of his term. 75% of the public trust the government to do the right thing. And that held true until about 1964. And then it started to decline. The 60s were tumultuous. I mean, you've got the assassination of Kennedy. The Warren Report came out in 64. I'm not sure at the time. My parents had a copy of that. It was, oh my gosh, that volume was thousands of pages long. I never sat down and read it word for word, but I, perused it.
Don't worry, President Trump's going to release all the records, right?
He did.
Well, the first time he's going to release more coming up.
Well, he just signed an executive order to release the remaining records of the Kennedy assassination. Now, I don't know how heavily redacted those are to draw any conclusions, but it's the idea that the government was colluding to cover up, the single gunman theory. And at this point, who knows? But that has created so many questions as to, well, did the CIA do that?
Right.
And
Mafia and all
right.
that.
I don't know. And then you've got Vietnam, which was really escalating at the time. And it was on television, and people feeling like, I'm not getting the whole story. And then you've got Watergate in the 70s, which, you've got a U.S. president lying, I am not a crook.
Yeah.
He was.
Yeah. Definitively so, yeah.
And Ford lost the election after he ascended to the presidency with Nixon's resignation. He pardoned Nixon before he could be charged with any crimes, did a preemptive pardon. So for those of you that are worried about what Biden did at the end of his term with preemptive pardons, it's been done before. It's not unprecedented. But people were fed up with Ford for doing that. They felt like, he wasn't held to the same standard we are. Then you've got the economy tanking in the 70s under Carter. You've got the Iran-Contra crisis. You've got Reagan coming in. You've got, that was the Iran-Contra, the hostages in Iran Reagan, under Carter. So this erosion of public trust in the government. And since 2007, that figure has never risen above 30%.
But this is not uniquely American. One can argue that's why the United States was founded, right? People left predominantly England and came to get out from underneath King George. One of my favorite quotes, and it's widely quoted, power corrupts, absolute power absolutely corrupts. That was Lord Acton, I believe. And he's a guy who lived in the late 1800s, so after the founding of the U.S., but way before this period that we're talking about. And he was write a letter to a bishop and talking about the policies in England and where power is more concentrated. But the United States was founded with checks and balances to counter having a king president. George Washington was readily aware of this. So this is a problem that creeps up all the time, of that you put too much power in a singular entity and it morphs into something that's just corrupt.
Yeah, and I want to get back to your comment on Washington, but let's go ahead and taste the remaining two. I tasted this benchmark earlier. I'll be curious as to your feedback on it.
So
I would say it's good.
Yes. So I like the Cliff Note version. I'll start with the beginning and end first. It doesn't have much of a nose. It's great on the taste though, and great in the finish. It's kind of it's not quite an oily finish, but has more viscosity to it, more of a flavor to it in the swallowing it and the finish. And so you'd have to go back. It's better than McKenna. It's right there with the Jack Daniel's Bonded. I really like this, and for a benchmark that's low shelf, that's pretty darn good.
Right. I would agree. From a value standpoint, it's good. I would still buy the Jack Daniel's Bonded before this. I would say it's a little thinner than the Bonded. To me, it drinks more like a 90 proof. Does not have the mouth feel or the character that Jack Daniel's Bonded. It's not as full flavored, but you do detect almost a floral kind of flavor on it.
Yeah, I was
initially.
about to say, call me crazy. I taste a little peach in there.
Yeah.
It's definitely a
Little
fruity caramel. It's not the maybe difference from Jack Daniel's. It's got more Jack Daniel's by design has more the charred charcoal smoke taste. This is more that same mash bill, I'm guessing, but has more of a fruity type lighter taste to it.
Yeah, I would agree. It's very likely a weeded mash bill, as Buffalo Trace is. That's their signature. And I think that's what we're detecting. So now we're moving to the super premium.
I'm excited about this.
So we've tasted $45 with McKenna, $40 with Jack Daniel's Bonded, benchmark $18. This is the 10-year-old Old Fitzgerald. Somewhere between $500 and $1,000. You can't find it in a store. You're gonna have to go to a secondary.
Yeah, you're gonna have to pay for this, right? And you're at the mercy of who has the bottle, who won the lottery, and now they're selling it to you. If you won the lottery, great, you get to buy it retail price. I'm not even sure what the retail price is because you just don't find it retail.
Right.
You find it by other means. This is legendary. I mean, so Old Fitzgerald goes back in the day. Julian Van Winkle, Pappy, he had his original fingerprints on this. Like we talked about already, it was parts of Stetzel Willer, and now it's part of Heaven Hill. But this is legendary juice here. This is old stuff here.
Yeah, and Heaven Hill produces more bonded whiskey than any distillery in the country.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and they, by the way, if you have an opportunity to take a bonded tour of Heaven Hill, I would love to hear your feedback because I regret not doing that when I visited that distillery. I really wanted to do that particular tour.
Yeah.
And it was too late for us to book that and couldn't, but I'd love to take that tour.
Well, this has it's a darker bourbon. When you look at it, it's because it's aged 10 years longer than the other ones, or some of the other ones there. But it's a darker in color.
Yeah, I'm sitting here cogitating, to use your word, and I think much more full mouthfeel, much more rounded in its flavors. The 10-year helps, but that McKenna wasn't. That didn't help at all. So, I mean,
this
is really good.
Yeah, this is just
the finish
good.
is perfect.
Yeah,
smooth as silk going down.
Again, I'm surprised. Not much of a nose to it, but it's a little more viscous. But man, this has great flavor to it. This is wonderful. To not use a very descriptive word.
Right. But no, I detect similar to that Bonded. It's got the hints of vanilla and, of course, the oak, and all of it's going to have an oak flavor.
Yeah. And this one more so probably because it's aged 10 years. This is a little crisp to it. It's not quite cinnamon, but it's almost like a apple crisp.
And I don't know if you did a blind taste test with me between the Old Fitzgerald and the Bonded, the Jack Daniel's Bonded. I don't know that I would pick this Old Fitzgerald over the other. I think they're so similar in terms of the quality that I don't know that I would be able to distinguish enough between them.
I bet you may not do it on the first glass, but when you compare the two, I bet you would, because this Old Fitzgerald is a little more viscous, and the finish is smoother. You don't have Jack Daniel's, as much as I love this, and it's a good finish. The Old Fitz is a better finish.
Yeah, I would. I think the Old Fitzgerald is smoother throughout. From the first taste, it's just perfectly blended. And that Jack Daniel's not quite as much. But again, I'm not sure without really thinking about it that I'd be able to pick
No,
them out.
I agree. And the Jack Daniel's has a little bit of a tart finish to it. Not that it's a bad tart, but it's a persimmon type tart finish to it.
Yeah, so, bringing it back to our topic as we, finish our tasting notes, I think the bonded, what a great example of the government really helping out.
Yeah, so you want the government to be the umpire, right? You don't want people putting up bad products in there, especially products that are harmful for you. And this, I think, maybe we mentioned it, maybe we didn't, but this was like the beginning of the FDA. It wasn't the FDA, but it was the first kind of thoughts of, hey, the government needs to make sure that, people are doing the right thing because, while there are corrupt people in government, there's corrupt people in the private sector as well, and they're just trying to make money, maybe on the sly, and the government makes sure they're putting out a good product. So this was a good private sector turned government role that is done well.
Yeah, and so I think the basis of the trust or distrust boils down to how you view government's role in your life. And I think this past election is a good example of that. Trump now having been reelected to non-consecutive terms, you've got Biden who represented the idea of big government needs to play a role in all of our lives for the betterment of the people, of the common good, versus Trump's ideal that the common good is best served by limited government. Reagan in his inaugural speech said, government is not the solution, they are the problem. That's a paraphrase, but that's effectively what he said. So I'm not saying which is right or wrong. I'm saying those are the two views that permeate from that. And I did say I'd go back to Washington. This idea of opposing views started with a man who could have been king. He was so well respected.
George Washington, right?
Yeah. The fact that he's referred to as the father of the country is true. We wouldn't exist without him. And almost immediately upon his taking office in 1789, the people in his cabinet, John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, Alexander Hamilton, they started infighting as to the role of the government. And so you had the two-party system develop. The Federalists, who thought strong federal government, versus the Democratic Republicans, that was the name of the party, who really felt like, no, we need to limit that role. That's the world we live in today. And I think there is a healthy distrust that has to exist with the government. That's the basis of America.
Well, going down to the core of the problem is that when you have a government run by faulty people, they make faulty things. The unique thing to America was you had these unique three houses, three branches of government that checked each other. It's not a perfect system. It's the best among your options here.
Yeah, and I think we're fallible. We may have gotten these tasting notes wrong, but once again, we've tasted really good whiskey. Yeah. We hope you guys have a chance to taste these same whiskeys. Do the same. Most of these you can find on a shelf with the exception of Old Fitzgerald, and we hope you can join us on Two Guys on a Porch.
And remember to like and subscribe. And this is not a soapbox about us talking about stuff. Go in there, not only like it, but comment. Tell us if we're off. Tell us if we're wrong. Iron sharpens iron, so tell us how we're wrong. Comment, let us know. Put your email in there so we can contact you. And we really appreciate you joining us. Two Guys on a Porch. Have a great day.
Life is much better with friends, a drink, and cigar, and some Two Guys on a Porch swag.
Let us know what your drink and cigar of choice is at twoguysonaporch.com, and you'll be entered into a drawing to get some Two Guys on a Porch swag